What's going on, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here. You're tuning in, of course, to another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Greatly appreciate you all tuning in tonight, Wednesday at 8. What better show to tune into Wednesdays at 8 online on the Buffalo Fanbase Podcast Network, of course, than the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. This is a huge show for you all today to tune into, to kind of just get some last minute thoughts on this draft, right? I'll be on, of course, for the next half hour. I will be diving into a lot in regards to this NFL draft that goes outside of One Bills Drive and inside of One Bills Drive. Starting the show off, of course, I would be remiss to not bring up the sponsor of this show, that is 26shirts.com, for all, Buffalo Bills fan gear that you're looking for. 26shirts.com, there's constantly new shirt, hoodie, hat designs that Fan of the Year Del Reed has to offer. So go to 26shirts.com today, make a purchase, and you'll really love the original concepts that they have with all of their gear. So let's get right to the action. That is the 2024 NFL Draft Eve Super Show Spectacular. That's what I'm calling this. That's what it is. The Super Show Spectacular. I made it a tongue twister for a reason. So, of course, throughout the show tonight, feel free to chime in, fire away some comments in the comment section below, wherever you're tuning in to chat with myself. I'll chat with you guys as we work through this show. If I don't get to your comments, I'll be sure to respond to them on my social media platforms. Okay, so a lot to talk about in regards to this, but one more sleep until NFL Draft Night. One of my favorite days of the year is the first round of the NFL Draft. You never know what to expect on NFL Draft Night. All the mock drafts, all the articles, they really don't mean anything, because these 32 general managers in the National Football League and coaching staffs out there will have a great idea as far as what they want for their roster, for their team. And I think it's pretty obvious, right, at this point, at the top of the draft, that USC quarterback Caleb Williams will be the first name that is called on Thursday night, tomorrow night, to the Chicago Bears. The Bears have the first overall draft choice. They also have the 9th overall draft choice. 2 top 10 picks due to the trade that they made with Carolina, in which the Panthers last season moved up from 9 to 1, oddly enough, and ended up taking Bryce Young. That first overall pick is actually Carolina's first overall pick once again, as Carolina was the worst team in the National Football League. The Bears now have that first overall pick, and then their pick being the 9th pick as well. So Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears is a sure thing, most definitely. But is Caleb Williams a sure thing? That's the first question that I throw out to the audience tonight. And as I looked at all the quarterbacks, I know that obviously my team is in no position of needing a quarterback. The Buffalo Bills, they have the second best quarterback in the league in Josh Allen, in my opinion. But I always like to look at the quarterbacks. It's the game's most important position. Of course, fantasy football, dynasty leagues, fantasy football carryover leagues, or keeper leagues, or just redraft leagues. You want to know what players are out there that you could go out and take, that you could feel comfortable taking as a rookie. And Caleb Williams, for me, I don't see the prospect quality that a first overall draft choice should be, especially at the quarterback position. You got to look at first overall draft pick quarterbacks in years past. Is Caleb Williams the next Cam Newton? I don't see that. Is Caleb Williams the next Andrew Luck? Andrew Luck was one of the best prospects heading into the National Football League of all time. Is he that? I don't think so. Is he Peyton Manning? Is he John Elway? I don't see these things from Caleb Williams. And not only do I not see them, I don't see how Caleb Williams going to the Bears will be any different at all than the previous two quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round by the Chicago Bears. Not saying that Caleb Williams is only as good as Justin Fields, not saying that Caleb Williams is only as good as Mitchell Trubisky, but I think Caleb Williams is only going to be as good as the team that drafts him. And for whatever reason, the Chicago Bears can't seem to get out of their own way. They have been an abyss for the better part of the last 15, almost 20 years now, since they went to a Super Bowl against the Indianapolis Colts, ultimately in a losing effort. They had guys like Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Charles Peanut Tillman. Remember him? Plenty of great players on that defense. Thomas Jones at running back. But Rex Grossman at quarterback. The Bears, for whatever reason, they just can't seem to get the quarterback position figured out. For their fans' sake, as they have great fans that root for that team out in Chicago, the Windy City, that is, I don't know if Caleb Williams is the guy that I pin my hopes and dreams on as being a franchise savior. I see a guy that has great escapability, great extendability, as I like to refer to it as well. Guy that can move in the pocket, extend plays, and throw from awkward angles. That's what has talent evaluators, scouts predicting that Caleb Williams could be the closest thing to Patrick Mahomes. And I am just not on that wavelength. I think that is recency bias. I think they try to do that. Every quarterback that's taken, they thought that such and such would be the next Brett Favre, be the next Tom Brady, would be the next Pat Mahomes. That's just what the media does in terms of comparing players to great players of this era. And to me, it's a little bit of a slap in the face to the greatness that Patrick Mahomes has shown. That was greatness that required, a lot of people forget this, but greatness that required Patrick Mahomes to sit a year behind Alex Smith, learn that Andy Reid offense, which is not the easiest offense to learn, and then move forward with the Pat Mahomes era, moving on from Alex Smith as he was traded to Washington. So to me, throwing Caleb Williams in the line of fire, he will be the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears. They didn't go out and get like a good, contingency plan. I look at their roster right now. I couldn't even tell you who the backup quarterback is, but I do know that tomorrow is a franchise-changing day for the Chicago Bears. They have a new plan to build a $4.6 billion domed lakefront stadium, and reports are saying in the Chicago Tribune that taxpayers would pay half of Chicago's stadium plan, which is absolutely insane, right? But that's the day and age that we're living in, I guess, right? So to me, when I look at the current Bears team, who is even at quarterback right now outside of Caleb Williams? Who's on the roster? Brett Rypien and Tyson Bagent, who played a couple games last year. A lot to do with that team right now. That's why they got 2 top 10 picks for a reason. They're not theirs, as I mentioned, but I don't know if Caleb Williams is this savior. Now, quarterbacks outside of Caleb Williams, one quarterback that I really like in this draft class is Bo Nix out of Oregon. I think that he is far too underrated for my liking in terms of what Bo Nix has done as a senior, coming off of his senior season, 24 years old. There are some quarterbacks that are taking it 21, 22, 23, and some teams really like that. But then in the case of Bo Nix, 24 years old, some teams will look at that and say, oh, he's 24. You're only going to have, 10 years with him at most, 15 years with him at most. Well, hey, 15 years is better than 3 with the other guy that you might take instead. Bo Nix had 45 touchdowns, 3 interceptions last season, 4,500 passing yards, and a 77.4% completion percentage. To me, when I look at the top teams in the draft, you look at the Bears. Obviously, as I mentioned, Caleb Williams will be the pick there. But second overall, you have the Washington Commanders. Third overall, you have the New England Patriots. So there is a real assumption here that those 3 teams will most definitely take a quarterback. in a row consecutively. There could be a scenario and a situation where the team that holds the 4th overall selection, the Arizona Cardinals, they decide to trade down to acquire more picks to build their team if a team is so hungry to move up to 4 and take a quarterback, which that team could be the Minnesota Vikings. They have 2 first-round picks in this draft. They pick 11th and 23rd. You take that 11th pick, package a group of picks to move up to 4, from 11 to 4, and take their quarterback. Arizona, very well, if they move down from 4 to, let's just say, 5 or 6 or 7, then they'll still, get that Marvin Harrison Jr. type player. I look at a very likely trade scenario where the New York Football Giants could move up from 6 to 4, only moving up 2 spots to take a quarterback. Could that quarterback be Bo Nix? I think it should be. I like Bo Nix much more than Drake May. I like Bo Nix much more than Michael Penix Jr. And a lot of evaluators have listed Penix Jr. and Drake May as possibilities, but I think you just got to look at not only the individual attributes of the player, but what did that player do statistically in college for their program? What type of leader were they for their collegiate program? And to me, you can't talk about Troy Franklin being a first-round pick if Bo Nix isn't throwing him the ball. So Bo Nix has been a really hot-button issue in this draft. I think a lot of teams could really use him. The Giants could use him. The Vikings could use him. And, of course, the Denver Broncos could really use him. NFL player comparison for Bo Nix, I would say, reminds me of a young Drew Brees. And I don't say that lightly. I have much, much respect for Drew Brees and his Hall of Fame career, what he was able to bring to the table as a soon-to-be Hall of Famer, no doubt about that. So Bo Nix, easily my second best quarterback in the 2024 NFL draft. Arguably, I think he could be the best 3, 4, 5 years' time, even better than Caleb Williams. Okay, now the next talking point on the NFL Draft Eve Super Show Spectacular is I always like to look at that one player. Who's that one player that really just jumps out at me as a talent, a guy that can just really be a game breaker in the National Football League, somebody that I really have looked at over the last 2 years as a player that should be a stud player in the National Football League. And that to me is tight end Brock Bowers. Bowers played 3 amazing seasons at Georgia. He was a part of 2 national championship teams, 2 bowl game wins in the 3 bowl game wins, 2 Orange Bowl championships, 2 Peach Bowl championship as well. Statistically healthy 3 years in a row. 15 games played. He did miss some games this past year, but statistically, one of the best tight ends in recent years to, come out of college football in college football history. I don't even want to put it to the simple in recent years connotation. Brock Bowers is an amazing player. And I look at these top 10, teams with top 10 picks rather. Obviously, I think that the quarterback run will start early in this draft. Then you could start to see some trades. But to me, a team like the New York Jets makes a ton of sense for Brock Bowers. And to me, obviously, if I throw out the New York Jets out there, I don't necessarily want a player as talented as Brock Bowers going to the New York Jets. But it would make Aaron Rodgers very happy to have a weapon like Brock Bowers in front of him. I think it would really help running back Breece Hall as well, who has really been a running back that, despite him being productive, has not been able to be as productive as he could be because of the fact that that box is getting stacked each and every time they give him the ball. There's no other threat outside of Garrett Wilson, who gets double teamed, to really protect Breece Hall and be that kind of, linchpin type player for their offense. I think Brock Bowers would open things up big time for the New York Jets. Could possibly go 10th overall to the New York Jets. That would be one of the smartest picks that the Jets have made maybe in their franchise history, because they've made many dumb picks over the years. Now, of course, as I shift gears to the next topic of discussion, this is the one that has dominated this draft. It's dominated Buffalo. It's dominated the headlines. The 2024 wide receiver draft class is one of the best ever. It really is. And it deserves to be listed as one of the best ever. Now, the need for wide receiver in this league at this time is higher than ever, right? This is a passing league now. It's shifted to that. You still need a good running game, but if you can get a high-quality wide receiver in this salary cap version of the NFL, where teams are paying their quarterbacks, 30, 40, in some cases $50 million a year, you would want a rookie contract for that position at a top, talent at that position at that. So I mentioned this today, and pardon me here as I scooch over here. I mentioned this today, and it's a very worthy topic. Today, the Detroit Lions, they extended, re-signed, whatever words you want to use, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And they didn't just extend him. They didn't just sign him. They gave him 4 years, $120 million, and what was it, $77 million out of that 120 is guaranteed. So with that, there is a lot of fans out there wondering, what does that do to the wide receiver position? Well, it does a lot, especially in the marketplace of that position. So you have the Amon-Ra St. Brown situation. He signs his extension. He's good to go. He's locked up, by Detroit, and they wanted to make sure that he stuck around. Good for them. They kept their guy, right? But in the case of the San Francisco 49ers, and in the case of Brandon Aiyuk, who wants more money, is due to get more money due to the fact that his contract is up next season, the situation just got a lot more complicated, because you have a player that wants more money, wants to get paid. The team that he's playing for clearly has not shown a willingness to do that yet. So they're in a little bit of a holding pattern. It makes the situation awkward between the player and the team. The player then decides, well, I'm going to have to be shopped. The team doesn't want to shop the player. They want to try to keep him, especially if it's just for one more year. In this case, they feel like they have the ability to, quote unquote, run it back with Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel and Purdy and all those guys out there. And they might be right. They might be back in the Super Bowl. They very well could be. I don't see why they shouldn't feel that way, to be honest, but it's not what's best for Brandon Aiyuk. He wants to get paid. He deserves his money, and his contract's coming up. He doesn't want to wait and go into free agency, run the risk of maybe getting hurt this year with the 49ers. And then what? Then what situation is he in? So if you were to trade for Brandon Aiyuk, it would cost you a premium price. It would cost you a first-round pick. It would cost you potentially more than that, as well as a big amount of cap space. Because if Amon-Ra St. Brown got $30 million, Tyreek Hill's making $30 million. Is Brandon Aiyuk in the same breath as those two receivers? No, he's not. But he's in like that next tier. And the next team that he goes to, he could be in that tier, depending on what role that team decides to put Brandon Aiyuk in. So I don't see Brandon Aiyuk being traded. I thought he would be. But once this news came out, it dawned on me that how is this team going to make this trade, especially when the other team that is in a need for a wide receiver is looking one day away from the 2024 NFL draft, and you have one of the greatest wide receiver classes ever. And the last time a wide receiver class was lauded as this great, 10 years ago, 2014, you had Sammy Watkins, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, Calvin Benjamin. Yes, Calvin Benjamin. He was in there, as well. So in terms of how that went, Odell Beckham Jr. had some good years with the Giants, but Mike Evans was actually the best wide receiver in that class. I don't even think it's close. Very interesting, right? How they were all great in college, but really only one stood out. I hope that's not the case for this class, and I don't think it will be. I think this class could actually be better, much better than what the 2014 class brought. So let's start with just going through the names, and this isn't a ranking. You could call it a ranking all you want, but I just want to go through the names in terms of how these guys are believed to go in order in this draft for the first 3 wide receivers, and then we'll kind of go to a sidebar conversation. Okay, so for me, the can't-miss prospect out of this great wide receiver draft class, of course, is Marvin Harrison Jr. And the junior matters. His dad matters in this league to this day. Helped revolutionize the position, was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL for the entirety of his career. Not, there were some years where Marvin Harrison wasn't great. No, every year that Marvin Harrison was healthy, which was the majority of the time, Marvin Harrison was great. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason. So Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out of The Ohio State, right? The offspring of Marvin Harrison. It's a huge deal. It's a huge, huge, huge deal in the sense that this has been a player that's been talked about for many years prior to even lacing up a college cleat or a college helmet, strapping on a college helmet. Marvin Harrison Jr. being the offspring of Marvin Harrison has been talked about since he was a kid. This is a kid that has been talked about making it to this moment since he was a little boy, since he was a 5-6-year-old kid. So the fact that not only was that the case, but the fact that the son of Marvin Harrison Jr., has made it this far is a testament to the fact that those that looked at him as an elite of the elite player were right. They were right. They had every reason to believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to be that special. And I think it has a lot to do with not just the physical gifts that were passed down to him by his dad, maybe the coaching that his dad implemented in his life. But this was a natural pathway for Marvin Harrison Jr., as I do believe he truly loves football. This isn't a situation where it's like a Todd Marinovich situation. This is a situation where Marvin Harrison Jr. wants to prove that he's not just a chip off the old block. He's not just another apple that's from the tree. He is his own player, and I think that makes him a very exciting prospect. And dare I say it, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best player in this draft wide, position wide. If I were to do a big board, he's number 1 on my big board. And I'm very curious to see where Marvin Harrison is going to go because of the fact that I have the first overall pick in my dynasty league that I acquired during the season. I made a big trade and got that pick. And it wasn't that pick at the time, but it ended up being that pick at season's end. So Marvin Harrison goes to like an Arizona Cardinals. I've always been a Kyler Murray fan. I like what he brings to the table. I think the lack of film story kind of was blown out of proportion. I think that the media kind of ran with it. Social media ran with it even more. I think Kyler Murray's got all the talent in the world. Former first overall pick himself, right? And dare I say it, going back to that Caleb Williams conversation, I don't know if Caleb Williams is better than Kyler Murray. I really don't. But Marvin Harrison Jr. to Arizona, Marvin Harrison Jr. to, let's just say, the Chargers, with Justin Herbert, with Jim Harbaugh, that would be probably the best case scenario for Marvin Harrison Jr. As well. The Tennessee Titans with a guy like Will Levis, who I'm really high on, who I was high on last year, even higher on him this year. What if the Atlanta Falcons got Marvin Harrison Jr., where they got Bijan Robinson last year, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., Bijan, Kirk Cousins, not bad, right? So a lot of things can happen within every scenario that presents itself with a player of this caliber. Marvin Harrison Jr., the cream of the crop at the wide receiver position, and the cream always rises to the top, as they say. Malik Nabers is the next one out of LSU. Game-breaking talent, can take over a game, has shown many, many times that he can come up big in big moments. And it goes without saying, LSU has been a powerhouse these last few years. But the name Malik Nabers is one that every football fan should already know prior to this draft. And I say that, and I mean it. Malik Nabers, when I look at what he did at LSU, 3,000 receiving yards in 3 years, obviously double-digit touchdowns, practically almost every not double-digit touchdowns every year, but double-digit yards per catch every year, averaging 15.9 yards per catch for his career at LSU, unanimous All-American, Citrus Bowl MVP, ReliaQuest Bowl champion as well. So, of course, being the kind of draft whiz that I try to be, very curious to see how the combine would work with Malik Nabers. I know he's a little bit smaller. They listed him at 6 feet tall, but I think he's a little shorter than that. I think he's like 5'10", to be honest. But very curious to see how he worked out at the combine, 4.35. That just goes to show you that the speed ability is there. The ability to catch the ball and turn it upfield is there. The ability to catch the ball in tight windows is there. And the ability to create is there. That's what I see when I watch Malik Nabers. I see a guy that can create. I see a guy that can extend. And I see a very exciting player. Now, the next wide receiver that I wanted to talk about was Rome Odunze. And to me, this is the guy that I look at and I see a guy that I really loved as a kid growing up here in Buffalo. I see like an Eric Moulds type wideout. He's 6'3", 220 pounds. There was another guy that played for the Houston Texans by the name of Andre Johnson, that big physical DK Metcalf kind of a little bit, but a little bit more of a speed factor despite the size that Rome Odunze has. His quickness has been something that has really marveled my eyes when I've watched his tape. Coming off of back-to-back 1,000-plus yard seasons in college, he only started 8 games his junior year and had over 1,100 receiving yards, 15 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns. And then last season, he had 13 games started, played in every game, caught over 80 balls, almost 1,500 receiving yards, and 13 touchdowns. Safe to say that Washington would not have been in the national championship had Rome Odunze gotten hurt, had Rome Odunze come up short. Really, there's a program out there in high school by the name of Bishop Gorman, which is a program that I'm aware of just kind of due to the fact that Dana White has worn, UFC president Dana White, he's worn a lot of Bishop Gorman t-shirts. They've been a very good college program just overall in sport, not just for football, but for baseball, for basketball. They've had a lot of players come out and make it, into the big leagues at that high school in Vegas. And that's where Rome Odunze went. So this really goes back to Rome Odunze being great in high school, getting out to Washington, being a great player for them. It was really great to know that he was able to cap off his collegiate career with a bowl game championship appearance. So those are the big three. And the wide receiver need for Buffalo is glaring. And this is, a great portion of the show to now talk about this and say to ourselves, which one of these receivers should Buffalo or could Buffalo target? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about wide receiver fit and possibilities for Buffalo. It's been a very interesting week in Buffalo sports. Leading into this draft, you have this talking point that we're about to dive into, and then the Buffalo Sabres, they go out and they sign Lindy Ruff, or hire, I should say, Lindy Ruff as their next head coach. And I had a submission here that I wanted to get to in terms of just what the fans are saying. I did a what the fans are saying kind of post, and Katie Krasinski said, in regards to Lindy Ruff being hired, I just wanted to throw this out there. What's the worst that can happen? We're already a joke. At least this brings some excitement to this dud of a franchise. Whereas the Sabres have been a dud, the Bills have been entertaining, but the Bills have made their team worse throughout the first couple months of their offseason, not better. This draft is an opportunity now for the Bills to make their team whole again, I think. And the wide receiver position being such an important one in today's NFL, the Bills have one of the thinnest groups at the wide receiver position in terms of talent. Right now, if you were to draw up a depth chart, newly signed free agent Curtis Samuel would be the wide receiver 1 of the Buffalo Bills. Quotation marks, though, I think the true wide receiver 1 currently, and quite possibly even if the Bills do take a wide receiver in the first round, could very well still be second-year pro Dalton Kincaid. So something that I definitely wanted to bring up before I dove into the possibilities for Buffalo. So, of course, those 3 that I mentioned, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, Rome Odunze, all of those players I do foresee being picked inside the top 10, if not top 12. At worst, top 12. Will Buffalo move up that high to go from 28th overall to the 12th, 11th, 10th, or a higher pick to take one of those guys? We won't know until draft night. No one knows until draft night. Despite what you hear, no one knows. No one knows a damn thing. So, I looked at receivers that I think Buffalo could move up for, receivers that Buffalo could take if they're there. And one that they would have to move up for, in my opinion, that's been rumored to go to Buffalo in a trade-up scenario is Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I put Brian Thomas Jr., George Pickens, because if there's any receiver currently in today's NFL that reminds me of Brian Thomas Jr., it's George Pickens. Now, Bills fans will look at this and they'll say, oh, George Pickens, you think he's like George Pickens? George Pickens stinks. No, he does not, first of all. George Pickens has been catching passes from Kenny Pickett and Mitchell Trubisky. Those guys are gone. Russell Wilson is there. Justin Fields is there. Those guys are better than Kenny Pickett and Mitchell Trubisky, right? So sometimes the wide receiver doesn't throw the football to himself, right? So George Pickens, I think, just talent-wise, just looking at George Pickens as a player, 6'4", 220, fast, nimble, agility for days, awareness for days. Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, another receiver out of LSU that was a game breaker for LSU alongside Malik Nabers. And Nabers is 20. Thomas Jr. is 21. So both of these guys have a lot to offer. Both of these guys marveled at the NFL scouting combine. And in the case of Thomas, he's a touchdown machine and kind of falls in line with myself, right? Thomas, touchdown machine, myself, touchdown machine too. This one, Brian Thomas out of LSU, he had 17 touchdowns in college football last year. He led college football with 17 receiving touchdowns. So good for him. We know that he's a game breaker. We know that he's a machine at wideout. Very nice fit for the Buffalo Bills if they were able to acquire him. Now, the next one is Xavier Worthy. And this is very interesting because I think when I looked at these wide receivers 2 months ago, if you were to tell me that Xavier Worthy would be one that I'd talk about on my podcast, I would have said, no, I'm not talking about Xavier Worthy. For all the reasons that you look at a player and say negative things. He's too small. He's too thin. Xavier Worthy fits those two things. But for all the right reasons in today's NFL of why players like that work more now than ever, you look at a Tyreek Hill, you look at a Devonta Smith, Xavier Worthy fits the mold of both of those guys. He's a small, fast, dynamic wide receiver that, dare I say it, would not shock me if Buffalo were to go this route due to the fact that general manager of the Buffalo Bills, Brandon Beane, even said himself, for the last 2 seasons that they've needed explosive players that can turn short into big, players that can stretch the field, players that can create separation. Xavier Worthy can do that. Now, if you're going out and you're drafting an Xavier Worthy, you are kind of trying to make this offense look a little similar to the Kansas City Chiefs when they did have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. In our case, we'd have Xavier Worthy, who's like the Tyreek Hill comparison, and Dalton Kincaid, who has largely been compared to Travis Kelce over the last 2-3 years, even dating back to his sophomore year at Utah. So that's why I find Xavier Worthy a very interesting pick. And I know that the scouting combine of Xavier Worthy arguably was one of the best of all time. Now, I've been on record, whether it's this podcast or other podcasts over the last 8 years that I've been doing this, that to me, now this is just to me here, just my opinion, the NFL scouting combine means jack squat. I could show you a picture of Tom Brady. That's the only thing I'd have to do to cement that point. But when you look at the detractors and how they look at a player, Xavier Worthy had a lot of people looking at him and saying, "Oh, he's not this, he's not that, he's not that." He shut up a lot of people when he showed that he was strong, dynamic, and the fastest 40 time that any player has ever turned in, as far as the stopwatch being lit on fire when he ran past it. Not literally, but figuratively, of course. So Xavier Worthy is a possibility. And it's one that I wanted to definitely bring up on the show. Xavier Worthy out of Texas, and then the Texas counterpart, Adonai Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell, as they call him. So A.D. Mitchell, somebody that I think his stock has kind of fallen a little bit. And I think it's due to a lot of preconceived notions about how he's not a hard worker. It isn't like to block and things like that. It's not really his game to block, but you're going to have to learn to some capacity. You're going to have to block to a larger capacity than what he did at Texas in the National Football League. So the reason I like Adonai Mitchell is due to the explosiveness as well. Being able to turn big plays, time in, time out, and be able to be big on the field. He's 6'4". He's 210 pounds. And as far as accomplishments go, national champion in 2 separate years, Big 12 offensive newcomer, just really burst onto the scene as he moved from Georgia to Texas in the transfer portal. That's where he won those 2 titles. I think Arch Manning is probably, wishing that Adonai would have stayed as he left his junior year, but got to get that money, kid. So he's going to get his money. He's going to get a rookie contract. He's going to get a first-round wide receiver rookie contract, and I like him for Buffalo. And then a guy that I just really like, and I want to kind of sidebar this topic, but didn't put him on here because I think he's more of like a second-round guy. 2 in particular would be Xavier Legette and Ladd McConkey. Those are 2 other receivers that I really like in this draft as possibilities for Buffalo. I think a lot of people look at Ladd McConkey. They see similarities to Khalil Shakir. I don't think you could ever have enough of those types of guys that can make work easy underneath for Josh Allen. You can never underestimate a slot receiver in this league and what it can mean for a quarterback, what it can do for a quarterback. Cole Beasley was a huge part of Josh Allen's development that I don't think gets enough credit. That might be because of how the social media people react to Cole Beasley's opinions and all that stupid shit. I'm just looking at the football field stuff. Cole Beasley was a great wide receiver for Buffalo for quite a few years and really helped Josh Allen. It'd be nice to get another version of that in Buffalo outside of Shakir and add like interchangeable Swiss Army knife type pieces like Ladd McConkey and Xavier Legette in this draft. A 40-minute show. And if there was anything I can say in these 40 minutes that I haven't said, the one thing that I'd say is that I've said this for years. In closing, the NFL draft turns pretenders into contenders. It turns contenders into champions. This is a pivotal moment in every franchise's present to help build their future. And for the Buffalo Bills, there's no bigger moment than tomorrow. Figuring out how to make this offense more explosive, figuring out how and who will be the heir apparent to Stephon Diggs, as Diggs is now gone and a new wide receiver will be entrusted to take his spot. Now, doesn't mean that he'll be asked to do the exact same things that Stephon Diggs did, but out goes one, in comes another. Out goes two, in comes two. Diggs and Davis gone, in comes two. I would really love for the Buffalo Bills to draft not one, but two wideouts, two wide receivers in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Super Draft Show Spectacular, Draft Eve Show Spectacular. This was very fun. It's going to be a very fun night tomorrow night. Kick back, enjoy it. I know I will. And of course, once this draft is all wrapped up, I'll give you guys my take on how the draft went down for the Buffalo Bills and some thoughts on some other teams' picks as well. Get an immediate reaction as well to the first round draft choice tomorrow night, right here on all of my social media platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in.